Welcome everyone to the Solitary Confinement Edition of the Confined Arts. My name is Kayla Gertis, and I will be your host for this wonderful gathering. The Confined Arts is a platform to illustrate and showcase the talents of currently and formerly incarcerated creative voices. We are creative voices that speak through our visual art, performing art, poetry, and music. We speak as creative voices in order to abolish the inhumane services, narratives, and socially degrading stigmas that are used to describe our past experiences and limit our futures. We've set out to establish new empathic narratives about who we are. The TCA platform is also open to those artists who work in or around jails and prisons or are in other ways linked to the issue of mass incarceration. TCA is also home to artists who have been affected by mass incarceration due to the imprisonment of a friend or family member. A special thanks should be given to the Justice and Education Initiative at Columbia University for its continued support of this program. For this edition of the Confined Arts, Opportunities and Change collaborated with the Campaign for Alternatives to Isolated Confinement to highlight the humanity of the people held in solitary confinement inside of our nation's prisons. The Confined Arts is one of 3 programs that was created and is currently facilitated by Opportunities and Change.
So thank you very much for coming out. Thank you. I'm Isaac Scott. This is Haiti Lee Toro. We're the co-founders of Opportunities and Change, and Opportunities and Change is the organization that created and currently facilitates the Confined Arts. We collaborated with Cake for this because a lot of the work that we do with the Confined Arts is to fight against mass incarceration, is also to promote the freedom of expression through the arts, and we understand that art is a socially accepted medium. You may not like, visual arts, you may like performing arts, you may not like performing arts, you may like literary art. So we understand that the art is the medium by which we can all meet and understand, and we will continue to use the arts to push forward these issues.
Hi everyone, Haiti Lee. I just want to thank everyone for coming out today. I brought a piece that I wanted to share with you. I'm always a learner, so this really blessed me, and I just wanted to share it with everyone. This is by Claire Forrest. Within each person lies a bone-deep longing for freedom, safety, hope, self-respect, and the chance to make an important contribution to family, community, and the world. To live fully, we each need ways to express this powerful natural longing. Without healthy outlets, the desire for freedom turns into lawlessness, and the need for safety and self-respect degenerates into violence. Without avenues to make an important contribution, hopelessness translates into dependency, depression, violence, substance abuse, and other forms of self-abuse. No government, program, or religious group can help people become self-reliant, contributing members of communities unless it is built on an understanding of this powerful force inside each human heart. So this piece, this piece blessed me because it just reminded me of why I do the work that I do, why I'm a part of this organization, and it speaks to humanity, which we so often forget. We always look at people's temporary situations. We look at them as numbers, for those of us working as case managers or, things like that in that field. So as you sit here and participate or receive the information today, I just want to encourage you to question yourself, right? Ask questions of, pay attention to your feelings. Why are you feeling these things when, someone may say inmate or whatever word that's used, just pay attention and question that. And with that, I just want to say thank you. We appreciate you for coming out on a Saturday.
On behalf of the Campaign for Alternatives to Isolated Confinement, I would like to introduce Brooke.
Hi, thanks for coming out. So the The Campaign for Alternatives to Isolated Confinement we go by CAKE. We are a diverse group of people directly affected by solitary confinement or incarceration, family members, concerned citizens, lawyers, activists, social workers, just a group of people that came together around the issue of solitary confinement, specifically its rampant use in New York State and the lack of limits on how much time people can be in there, and pretty much the inhumanity that people face in solitary confinement. So our group has a piece of legislation called the HALT Act, which is the Humane Alternatives to Long-Term Solitary Confinement Act, and we are trying to get it passed in the New York State Legislature, and it would pretty much result in a radical reform of the way solitary confinement is used in all prisons and jails in New York State. It would install a limit. Currently, there is no limit on how much time someone can spend in solitary confinement, so this would put a maximum limit of 15 days, which is in line with the United Nations determination of what is torture. But it would also create alternative forms of rehabilitation and a way to actually deal with the issue that causes people to commit offenses. But it would also reduce the amount of offenses that could place people in solitary confinement. So if the law was to be passed, it would be really a radical shift in New York State corrections institutions. So we have an upcoming advocacy day in Albany where we're going to try to speak with legislators to get more of them to sign on so that the HALT Act can be passed. We have a lot of sponsors already in the New York State Legislature, and we would love you to join us. We have training sessions coming up in Manhattan and in Brooklyn. There's information outside. There's a table. We do a monthly action that's part of a national effort where we, on the 23rd of every month, to represent the 23 hours a day that people are inside, we go out and we do actions to educate the public about what solitary confinement is like in New York State and about our bill and trying to end it. So, yeah. Thank you so much for coming.
That, as a formerly incarcerated woman who spent 5.5 years in prison, I remember a lot of people going to solitary, and I myself, I spent 45 days, and it was at a time where I really needed to be around somebody because I was really broken and on drugs, and it was the beginning of my incarceration, and, at that point, I did contemplate suicide. So it just goes to show that when you isolate people, that's not what people need. People need help. They need to be understood. They need to be given direction. I hope you guys were touched by that, because I was. We will now have a solitary confinement discussion led by several professionals in the fields of criminal justice, reform, and isolated confinement. I would like to bring up the director of the program for Drive Change, Mr. Roy Waterman. Roy Waterman is the director of Program for Drive Change. Roy is one of the founding members of this vibrant organization with a food truck, Snow Day, where they believe in changing the way people view and treat formerly incarcerated youth. Through this nonprofit, they train, empower, employ, and teach transferable skills to young people ages 16 to 25 years old, whom have been released from adult jails and prisons in the New York State area. It is Roy's life mission to assist in the development of these formerly incarcerated young people. He has a personal vested interest with them because he was incarcerated at 19 years old and then released at 32. While incarcerated, he received a degree in paralegal studies and is a certified law clerk in New York State. Since his release, he has become a chef and owns a catering business, Caribbean Soul Caterers, which he still operates today. He is also an avid and involved activist, pushing against all the injustices that currently plague our criminal justice system. He has spoken at numerous universities and high schools around the country about criminal justice system and what reform looks like in this faulty system that exists today. Please come up, Roy. Round of applause for Roy.
Thank you. Welcome. Thank you again to Isaac and Johnny as well for providing this platform for, continuing to push forward, continuing to allow us, as I like to say, a lot of people ask me why I do what I do, and I tell them I'm the voice for those that can't be heard right now. So as long as we keep pushing forward and keep being the voices for those that are behind the wall, those that are in solitary confinement, their voices will be heard vicariously through us. I myself spent almost 13 years in prison. I did roughly around a little less than a year in and out of solitary confinement / the shoe / the box / the hole. These are all variations of names that we have for this 23-hour lockdown that Johnny mentioned earlier, that sometimes if it wasn't your day, you actually spend 24 hours and you missed your shower, you missed your meal, and you had to take bird baths. So I like to describe it as being alive inside of a coffin. So I want to talk about some of my panelists here today. The first one, Dr. Leanne Francis, is an assistant professor with a dual appointment in departments of African American Studies and Women and Gender Studies at the College of New Jersey. Leanne holds a PhD in United States and African American History from Rutgers University, an MA in U.S. and World History from SUNY, and a BFA in Painting and Illustrations from RIT in her unpublished book manuscript, Jane Crow, Justice, Race, Crime, and Punishment in New York State, 1893 to 1916. Analyzes the intersections of gender, race, and class by exploring crime and punishment, labor and community through the lens of Black women's experience, while offering comparisons with imprisoned, native-born, and European immigrant white women. As a Rutgers graduate student, she was a volunteer. Let me make this bigger. She was a volunteer and instructor at Mount View Youth Correctional Facility for Men in New Jersey. The incarcerated and formerly incarcerated young people with whom she worked and taught many things, including how unexamined the privilege of freedom is in her life. For this gift, she's deeply grateful. In addition to mentoring formerly incarcerated students, Professor Francis has mentored and supported student activists, raising consciousness about the variety of social justice issues inside and outside their college campus community, including the crisis of mass incarceration, prison rights, racial profiling, police brutality, instructional oppression, and impoverishment of people of color, women, immigrants, people with disabilities, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer people, and the people at the intersections of these identities. When she's not teaching or researching or writing, she's enjoying spending time with her spouse, Jenny, and their 2-year-old twin sons, Rustin and Langston. Our next panelist, Jennifer Paris, Director of Criminal Justice Advocate at the Urban Justice Center. In her current role, Jennifer employs systemic litigation and legislation advocacy, community education and coalition building to address the problems wrought by the criminalization of mental illness. She leads a team of advocates who work towards ensuring the discharge and planning is provided to individuals with mental illness who are released from correctional facilities, and for elimination of solitary confinement in jails and prison. She is founding member of the NYC Jails Action Coalition, which promotes human rights, dignity, safety for people in New York City jails, New York Campaign for Alternative to Isolated Confinement, which advocates for the enactment of the HALT Solitary Confinement Act, alongside New York Lawyers for the Public Interest, a landmark case which requires New York City to provide discharge planning to people receiving mental health treatment in New York City jails. Prior to joining the Urban Center in 2004, Jennifer worked as a staff attorney in the criminal defense Legal Aid Society, and is visiting associate clinical professional at the Criminal Law Clinic at Benjamin Cardozo School of Law. Jennifer has testified before the New York City Council, New York State Assembly, New York City Board of Correction, and the New York Advisory Committee to the U.S. Commission of Civil Rights. She has been a panelist for Practicing Law Institute, American Bar Association, and American Association for Psychiatric Administrators. She's also lectured about mental illness and incarceration at Columbia University, NYU, Cardozo School of Law. She was invited to participate at the Mayor's Task Force for Behavioral Health and Criminal Justice Department of Corrections Advisory Boards. She co-authored When a Person with Mental Illness Goes to Prison, How to Help, and has his opinion pieces published in New York Times. Jennifer received a BA from Austin College, her MS from Elementary Education from Lehman College, and her JD from New York NYU School of Law. Nate Williams was born in Louisiana. He grew up in Brooklyn and in the Bronx, and he resides due to hardships, trials, and tribulations he faced early in years in life. Nate has served 6 years in penitentiary for armed robbery and grand theft auto. After being released, then decided to take seriously the thing he loves dearly, his sound, his music. He calls mind elevation, street gospel rap. Nate is currently working on 2 projects, Street Gospel Project and Poetic. Okay. Not official, been homeless, overcome the obstacles, and still striving and surviving. Today, he volunteers in soup kitchens and Hungry as the co-ed shelters throughout New York City. My future plans are to keep making a difference throughout the communities. My motive is to keep spreading and executing the truth, knowledge to people with positive influence music, keep elevating mentally, and never sell out. Nate loves to work out on his spare time. He calls his workout not official pull-up, incline, decline time. As he always says, mind elevation, mind up, health is the true wealth, knowledge is power. Listen to Walk in My Shoes, feature Third Eye, produced by Too Deep. Our next and last panelist is Ricky Jones. Almost 13 years of incarceration. Mr. Jones has transformed his life. He has transformed his life and now is the host of a local radio show called Unlocked on 90.3 FM that airs every Wednesday from 4 to 5, discussing issues around the criminal justice system. He also has a master's degree in guidance counseling from LIU, master's degree in theology from the New York Theology Seminary. He received a bachelor's from St. John's and completed management alternative training program offered by NYC DEP Housing. Preventive and Development. He is a certified paralegal, has done training for senior law enforcement, Board of Education, NYC Housing, partnerships with Chamber of Commerce, and he's also a faculty member for 2 private colleges, teaching in the philosophy, psychology, and American history. So please give our panelists a hand. I'm out of breath. So, as it was said before, this is a conversation. I'm going to ask them a couple different questions about solitary confinement. First, I would like to first I want to state something real quick, and that is the history of solitary confinement, in case you didn't know this. At first, the experiment in solitary confinement in the United States begins in Eastern Penitentiary in Philadelphia in 1829. In 1890, an opinion concerning the effects of solitary confinement on inmates housed in Philadelphia, a U.S. Supreme Court justice named Samuel Freeman Miller finds a considerable number of prisoners fell from which it was next to impossible to arouse them. The others became violently insane. Others still committed suicide, while those who stood the ordeal better were not generally reformed. In most cases, did not recover sufficient mental activity to be subsequent service to the community. Use of solitary confinement was largely discontinued in the United States in 1890 when the Supreme Court ruled it led to mental deterioration. Now, Fast forward, the practice was re-implemented into 1980s and the 1990s as part of the so-called War on Drugs campaign. Approximately 50% of suicides in prison are done by the 4% population that is in solitary confinement, in case you didn't know. So, my first question is to Leanne Francis. With the recent ban on solitary confinement for juveniles around the federal level as well as some state levels, do you think that we are in a place in history where people are finally beginning to have change of heart, and why?
I don't think most people think about solitary confinement at all. There has been significant change, as many of you know, and have been a part of. There has been significant change. There was a law passed fairly recently that says juveniles should no longer be kept in solitary confinement, yet they still are. There are still children in solitary confinement. As Johnny said, an estimated 80 to 100,000 people are in solitary confinement today, even though since the first jail that used solitary confinement was built, which was 1790, immediately wardens, activists, and the prisoners themselves saw people going insane after days of solitary confinement. They're just mentally unraveling. People have understood since the early 1800s that solitary confinement is torture. So prisoners' voices, activism from prisoners themselves, and activism on the part of people that care about prisoners' rights and support prisoners' rights has influenced lawmakers in different parts of the country to make changes, has influenced President Obama's thinking about solitary confinement. But I still believe that most people, there's also the growing awareness of mass incarceration over the past few years, Black Lives Matter activism, but most people don't think about solitary confinement. Most people, and I'm sure there's still plenty of support for it, because there is a belief that the people in solitary confinement, that people in prison in general, are unworthy, bad people that did horrible things that should be locked away and shut out of society. But it's very clear to me that it is torture, and that it should be completely abolished, no matter who you are.
Thank you. Thank you. And my next question is for Ricky Jones. As the host of Unlocked, how do you think solitary is portrayed in the media? And how can the media aid in reforming the efforts?
Well, I think that the media hasn't done enough around this issue. This is an uncomfortable truth that people just don't like to talk about. It is a way for those who are in the criminal injustice system can hide their ills from the general population. And I think once we begin to learn some of the deprivation that people go through in solitary, we will become more sensitized, because I think we are almost become desensitized to suffering. There are so many people in solitary who are losing their minds, who are almost ill-equipped to deal with society upon release, and now they're releasing people direct from solitary confinement to the public. And one of the things that, in addition to me being a talk show host, one of the things I also do, I'm the executive director of the Harlem Restoration Project that deals with reentry issues. And we have men and women coming out of prison after 20, 30, 40, up to 50 years. Some of which have done over 10 years in solitary. And there's no, this is why we're just targeting this population, because there's no real service for the long-term offender, as well as those who have done prolonged time in solitary. But again, I think the issue of solitary confinement is not publicized enough. A number of us who have been victims of solitary confinement, I've done close to 5 years in solitary. And one of the things that those of us who've experienced that and got on with our professional careers, we have a tendency of hiding in the closet. And now it's time, I think, we come out of the closet and begin to become vocal on this issue.
Thank you. I wanted to mention, before I ask my next question, I want to mention something about the ineffectiveness of solitary confinement. States that reduce their use of isolation in prison by up to 75% saw a significant decrease in prison violence. One statewide study showed that the people who were released directly from solitary confinement into society had a recidivism rate of 64%, as opposed to 41%, which is like the natural rate. Individuals spent more time in normal prison setting before returning to society. So basically, because the mental effect of solitary confinement allowed these people who were engaged with that experience to more likely land back into prison or jail. Why? Because as Ricky just mentioned, already when you're in prison, you don't have access to, just basic necessity, basic needs that you need, especially when you're about to come home. Being in isolation, you definitely don't have it, because here you are by yourself. No one's coming to talk to you. You don't have no pre-release or no transitional service things that are provided for you to say, okay, you're going to society. We know you need to work, so let's do this 2-week training. You don't even get that while you're in solitary. So my next question is to Nate. As a spoken word or artist and musician, how did you use poetry and music to do your time in solitary? As well as the second part of the question is, how can the arts be used to help reform solitary confinement?
Okay, so when I was incarcerated, it was probably like 60 months. No, not 60 months, it was like 60 days. So prior to that, I just started writing, and I started writing, and I started getting better, because I knew my life wasn't over. It was just a phase in life, so I just started writing. I started making songs, and I was like, I could, make some money when I get out, so, but prior to that, it was, it just kept me, at first, I thought about suicide, but I already knew my life wasn't over. It was just a phase in my life. And as far as with the Confined Arts, I think that is a good program, and that people can utilize. People that come home, people can utilize. This how should I say, this program.
Thank you, Jennifer. What are some of the advocacy efforts currently happening here in New York, and has there been any progress? If not, what needs to be done to move forward?
Sure. So there has, I agree, we have a long way to go. There has been some progress in New York. I was involved in an effort with a lot of people, many of them who are in the audience today, to try to get a law passed that would keep people with mental illness out of solitary confinement. And that was kind of our initial step in New York to change things. And there is a law now that says that if you have a serious mental illness, you're not supposed to be kept in solitary confinement, which you would think is obvious, that someone who already has issues affecting the way that they feel and think and process information, that if you keep them in isolation and deprivation, you're only going to make things worse. So that's a law that's on the books, and it has helped some people. There are some people who've been moved into more therapeutic units where they have more time out of cell and actually receive some programming. But it certainly doesn't go far enough. In fact, even in the state prison system where this law applies to, there are still 700 people in solitary confinement who are receiving mental health treatment, and thousands more who are subjected to those conditions. And what we know about those conditions is that they actually can cause people who haven't had any mental health issues to develop them by nature of that isolation. And in fact, the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene looked at 250,000 incarcerations in the city jails, and they found that people who are subjected to solitary confinement are almost 7 times more likely to engage in acts of self-harm or suicide. So I think that's definitive proof that those conditions are torture and that we should not allow them. So right now there's an effort, obviously, Brooke mentioned the Halt Solitary Confinement Act, and that's what we're all working to get passed here. It would dramatically change the way solitary is used in this state. In fact, it would alter it so that no one's there for more than 15 days, and that some people who are particularly vulnerable would not be placed in solitary at all. And instead, it would create rehabilitative units where people who have engaged in seriously harmful conduct against others might need to move away from the general population, but instead of just throwing them away and not caring about them, we would actually try to treat the underlying problems. And I think that solitary confinement is just the most extreme part of the whole mass incarceration problem, where our country has decided that there are people that we can just throw away and not care about. And I think that's why it's so important that we are bringing in the arts, because I think it's one way to connect to people's humanity. And so the Halt Solitary Confinement Act, it's, any law, it's all about how it's implemented, right? So we have support for that. We have over around 57 legislators that are on board with that. We're obviously pushing for more, but just getting a law enacted won't solve the problem. We have to actually change people's hearts, and we have to transform our society so that we don't think that anyone can just be thrown away, that we still care about them as a person and try to feed their humanity and to allow them to have a chance to rejoin our society. So I think we are asking for a lot more than just a change in the law, but a whole social movement around this.
Thank you. It's funny because we're in a time right now, I guess you would say in history, where reform is a hot, ripe topic. Ending mass incarceration is a hot, ripe topic, solitary confinement. And, it seems like finally we're getting more people who are not directly affected by mass incarceration have a voice now to support the movement of what's going on around the country. As many of you know, we have less than 25% of the world's population, and how much of a percentage do we incarcerate? Like, the numbers are staggering. I want to mention a little bit about the cost of solitary confinement. So actually being in your cell for 23 hours a day actually can run almost up to almost $80,000 more per year per person that's in prison. So what that means is, if you're on Rikers Island, which it costs $167,000 a year to be incarcerated for 1 year on Rikers Island, if you were in solitary confinement for the whole time you're on Rikers Island, you have to tack on an additional up to $80,000 per person. $80 billion is like the budget of what is prison, what is probation, parole. Over 2 million Americans are on some sort of supervised release paper or something, and these numbers are just straight up staggering. So I have another question that I want any of you guys can jump in on this question. What can be used as an alternative to disciplinary action inside of jails and prisons for solitary confinement? Because we talk a lot about ending solitary confinement. So what is the alternative? Just like how we all talk about ending mass incarceration. What is the alternative? So what's the alternative if we were to get rid of solitary confinement as a whole? Can you brainstorm in your head really quickly what could be a possible alternative?
I'll start.
Okay.
So Bill Clinton had the brilliant idea, or somebody under him had the brilliant idea in the 1990s. You know, the first black president?
Yeah.
Bill Clinton. Well, he was really, okay, I'll stop there. Bill Clinton eliminated in most prisons college education programs. So address broader structural problems, abolish solitary, but provide education, provide social services, adequate therapy and counseling. Don't punish people who try to commit suicide. I mean, people are punished. They try to commit suicide and they're put in solitary, which just increases the chances that they're gonna do it again. Also, mentally breaking them down, driving them deeper and deeper into depression and possibly total insanity. Make prisons rehabilitative spaces. Our prisons do not rehabilitate. That is not the purpose of the prison system today. The prison system today is there to warehouse, to corral a majority of poor people of color, and control them. Lock them away where we don't see anymore. So we don't see them anymore. So that would be a start. And actually, you mentioned a statistic where in Maine, I think it was, solitary confinement wasn't used anymore. They stopped using solitary confinement or drastically reduced it. Prison violence decreased by 70%. So this would. If those kinds of changes were made, if the infrastructure was reformed, built up, you would see a decrease in prison violence. You would see an increase in mental health, people getting mentally healthy, and people are better prepared to survive when they're outside of prison.
Thank you. You know, before one of you answer this question, the same question, I want to say, you know, support goes much further than people can ever imagine. We all need people to affirm us. We all need people to speak positively into our lives. No one has made it to being successful or what your perception is of what success is by themselves. They had a group, they had a team, they had a community, they had people that were speaking into their lives, especially during the times when they were going through. So, like you just mentioned, like when you get rid of these things and you provide other services, it should be circled or focused around, you know, empowerment. They changed, so if you notice, years ago when they changed the name of prisons, and like most prisons, to correctional facilities to make it sound better so that it could be tradable on the stock market, they weren't correcting anything. There are three things that officers, I know when I was in Clinton, which I did 5.5 years in Clinton, they used to say the three C's: care, custody, and control. That's their job, nothing else. So yes, so I'll rephrase the question again for someone that asks to answer it, please. What can be used as an alternative to disciplinary action inside of jails and prisons to solitary confinement?
I thought all of those suggestions are great, and I think that's where we need to go. But I just wanted to point out that solitary confinement is not used solely for violent incidents. I think that's the false picture that's presented. Solitary confinement is used for every single infraction that you can commit. I mean, they do have lower tier levels, but most of them, simply violating what an officer orders you to do, can you wind up in solitary confinement. So there are so many people that could be completely moved out of solitary if we got rid of that right there. So I think that's the first step. And then we look at the behaviors of people who are in that smaller group and then figure out how we can address that. And I think all of the things that were mentioned in terms of education and therapy and positive incentives for doing things. Right now, as you said about control is the way that prison system operates, complete control, and it's not about empowering people or about recovery. It's really about grinding people down and destroying their humanity.
Thank you. It is about the humanizing. It is about the moralizing. And yes, that's exactly what it is. Nate, you want to?
Yeah, I definitely agree with these the two ladies there. Like, instead of because like when I had went to solitary confinement, I went in for a spoon. It was a missing spoon. Like when you get back your spoon and it was missing, and I had misplaced it. So that's what I got the 30 days for in solitary confinement. So
wow.
it was crazy. So I think I do definitely agree with these women here. Like, they need to start giving back, or more education, more. There's a lot of work to do.
Most people in solitary committed, I should have said that, thank you, have committed no act of violence at all. It's been a response to, like you said, you commit any sort of perceived violation, you're put in solitary, but also to deal with overcrowding. And I should have mentioned that one of the reasons that there are people now considering changing that, in addition to the activism, is money. It's costing people that already have money too much money. So let's decarcerate. Let's do something about solitary, because $80,000 is a lot.
And they're not coming back to my neighborhood too, right?
I think just
Unfortunately.
one other piece of that too is that we have a broken parole system. So if
Yes.
you really wanted to give people incentives to follow the rules in prison, we'll tell them you're going to get parole. But we know people are not getting parole. No matter how well you do, no matter how much education you participate in, no matter how many programs you go to, you're not going to get parole. So I think fixing that system could be a way to give, if we want people to do well in prison, we should have a realistic parole system, and we don't.
Thank you. I agree. Ricky?
Yes, I just like to include the aspect of, part of the capitalistic system is also inequality, and that also is prevalent in solitary confinement, because when you look at the ratio of ethnicities who go to solitary, rarely do you see white people in solitary. It's all black and brown. And that element, we have to look at that, because, it's not just about breaking prison rules. It's also looking at, if you have the label of an organizer, they will throw you in solitary. I went to solitary for reading the autobiography of Malcolm X, and it was forbidden in Elmira at the time. And these are the type of infractions that you can get, and they are frivolous infractions, but they just want to bring you out of population to stop any type of continuity or programs you're trying to develop amongst the prison population. So I think the therapeutic aspect has to be put in place. The fact that the prolonged solitary can really diminish a person's capacity to interact with people. But one of the things I also see is how a lot of people, your social skills are limited. One of the things about solitary, you don't even know how you look after a certain period of time. You say to yourself, am I getting wrinkles? Am I getting gray hair? Or, these are little things that you begin to realize. How do you tell time? You tell time by your meals, and sometimes they would mix your meals up, give you breakfast for dinner, and would throw your whole timing off. So there's some things that are going on in solitary confinement that the more we publicize it and have conversations like this, I think we can really do a tremendous good.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to open it up for anyone that has any questions for any of our panelists. I'm going to say this because it was mentioned with solitary confinement, which is funny, which is weird. Broken windows policy / stop and frisk. How does it ties into solitary confinement? It was mentioned before how you go to solitary confinement for not breaking a law, but for like some sort of disciplinary infraction. It's similar to when you're on parole or probation. A lot of people are being entering the system, and recidivism is so high at over 70% within the first 3 years because they're violating their curfew. They're moving without telling their PO. They're all these things. They're getting a license legitimately, and they're driving without telling their PO. All these systems, like you mentioned, the parole board's a whole nother panel discussion altogether. I got hit at the parole board, so I know. So anyone has any questions, please. Johnny has the microphone. He's circulating. Raise your hand, please. If you have a question for any of our panelists, he's running across the room right now.
Can you please stand up, say your name, please?
Hi, I'm Ed Wesley. I graduated from St. Francis College in 1965. The economic impact that you've mentioned of how much incarceration costs is obviously a great statistic, and it's being used more and more. However, the economic impact that has stopped the closing of prisons in New York State is because too many of our upstate communities depend on prisons for their livelihood. So, you're between the devil and the hard point when it comes to that.
I completely agree. A lot of you don't know, if you haven't been to any upstate facilities, some of these towns located upstate, the only industry they have is the prison industrial system. That's the only one. Pretty much when you go to a prison in Clinton, Dannemora, in Comstock, Attica, you'll meet an officer and his mother works there, his father works there, his little brother works there, the whole family works there. So it's pretty crazy.
Can you please say your name?
Yeah. Hi, my name's April Hinkle. I work inside Rikers as a counselor, hopefully doing some kind of good, but I'm in there 5 days a week. And one of the biggest challenges I see and that I would foresee in creating new programs is that people have a lot of great ideas, and we come in with open hearts and with the intention of doing some really good things. And in order to get to that population, you have to go through all the toxic filters of DOC. So do you guys have any ideas of how we can really transform a good and inspiring idea into something that works within their mind frames?
Thank you.
One of the things I think we need to get a grip on is the fact that we are living from a punitive mentality. We are looking to punish, and once we overcome that punishment mentality and get back into the so-called rehabilitation, I think they will be more receptive to new ideas that are productive. But right now, people are just looking for blood, and if they can't see that this person is being punished enough, they won't give you any time of day on certain issues.
Donald Trump.
Well, I am actually really sorry that I don't have an answer directly to your question, but I do feel the need to say that I think that prisons should be abolished, that there needs to be, that it's not working. I'm not sure if prisons contain the capacity to be reformed, if prisons can be reformed, which wouldn't stop me for arguing or advocating for reforms to happen. But the prison system is broken. It's fundamentally violent. It's fundamentally racist. It's fundamentally classist. It should be illegal. Like, nobody should be able to make money off of locking people up. That should be completely illegal. Nobody. And if you're going to penalize people for using drugs, and if you're so concerned about, actually, the concern is it's basically poor black and brown people that can't smoke pot, because on the college campus that I work on, which is majority white, those kids are smoking a lot of pot, and they're not going to see the inside of a jail cell. They're not going to be arrested ever for that. But if you're going to lock people away for doing drugs, then send them to some sort of rehab services. And most people wouldn't be incarcerated in the first place if their communities had the same things that the prisons need, if they had school systems that worked, if they had jobs in their communities, if they had public transportation to get to the jobs inside or outside their communities, if their streets were clean, if the hyper-policing was replaced with social services. So much prisons are a symptom of what is severely wrong in our society. You have entire white communities across the United States whose economy would be destroyed without a prison. Destroyed. Now, I don't want people to be out of work, but you should not be making money from locking up black and brown people. That's horrifying. It's horrible. So there needs to be more outrage. Like, people should be outraged. People should be disgusted by the fact that the United States, the symbol of freedom and democracy in the world, incarcerates the most people on the entire planet. That's horrible.
Thank you.
So, okay, I see a few questions. I'm coming to you. I have the gentleman right here, and then I'm going to make my way around there.
Put your hand up if you have a question, please.
Okay, yes. Jerry Lamb, I teach over at Hudson County Community College, and I often discuss with the students the fact that there's a priority when people are incarcerated, and that's to punish, punish, punish. But in actuality, when we're raised as children, of course, punishment is designed to teach a lesson. Understanding that we have this concept of punish means, from one aspect, to kind of torture, and the other aspect of our society is hell-bent on making money in the prison system. The question is, where's the paradigm shift where we can say, okay, how is it that those who want money can make money, but in that same breath, we have some sort of rehabilitative services, which really touches upon the idea that, one of the questioners, articulated earlier about prisoners having these, or inmates having these wonderful ideas. I mean, the concept of Fortune 500 companies being in prison system is real. So if people who are in power want money, the question is, what can we think of? What kind of paradigm shift can we have in which rehabilitative services and the fact of people wanting to make money, combine together?
So if I'm hearing you right, you're asking, can rehabilitation and profiteering for prisons coexist? Does that sound good? Yeah.
Anyone?
Well, one of the things I think we need to think about is the same way we used to treat organizations that were invested in apartheid, we need to do the same thing that businesses who invest in prisons, Macy's, J.C. Penney's, all these organizations, Victoria's Secret, have products in the prisons.
That's right.
So ladies, burn your Victoria's Secret and let us just stick together and show that we are against this type of profiting.
Don't forget Michael Jordan either.
Yes. Thank you.
Well, if I may, one of the things that Frederick Douglass says is easier to build a strong child than to fix a broken man. And one of the things that we're doing at Harlem Restoration Project, we have adopted 2 schools, elementary school and junior high school, because we want to stop that school-to-prison pipeline. And we're bringing people who are formerly incarcerated into these schools, engaging these kids, and I think it's going to be have an impact. And also one of the things that we do, we are outside of the school during dismissal time, because a lot of times the fights start, the gang recruitment starts and all that, so there needs to be a heavier community presence on when the kids are exiting the school so they can make sure that there's a corridor of safety that they can go home. So certain things you can do.
Thank you.
And I think it's also just as she was mentioning the prisons and jails are just a symptom of the problem. That's what's happened with people with mental health issues who are not getting treated on the outside, is they're winding up in prisons. And so we need to devote the resources to having services that are easily accessible to people and are welcoming and are based on recovery principles, so that people don't wind up in jails. But you're right, we have to stop the prison to school to prison pipeline, and we are kind of going in the opposite directions, because more and more our schools are becoming completely policed from elementary school age. So we have to reverse that. And I think also just thinking about the economics of it, we don't have, we can always find the money to fight a war, we can always find the money for the police, we can always find the money for the jails, and we need to turn that on its head and always find the money for the schools and the mental health services and the things that help people develop into the people we want to have in our society, instead of figuring out what to do when people have problems afterwards.
Thank you.
So we have another gentleman here, and then we probably take one more after that. We want to make sure that at 2:40 we conclude, because we have a gentleman calling in directly from prison. What's your name?
Hey, how you doing? My name is Vidal Guzman. I work for Snow Day, Roy's truck. Basically, I did 7 years. I was locked up when I was 16, 17. I was in Rikers Island. I called it the corrupted time. You know what I'm saying? This is when people was getting jumped, killed, murdered, anything you could think about, 16, 17. We was, and when I was locked up, anything would happen. Police was part of everything, you know what I'm saying? This is what people don't tend to know, that, what we don't see in there and what we tell you is unbelievable, you know what I'm saying? I was only home when I was 18. I'm 24 now, so in my life I did 7 years. So as you know, being upstate, I was in Green Correctional Facility. That's one of the part of the prisons that actually has college. But in there, it's also a lot of things that goes on. In Green, they call it the gladiator school. As people know, because it's not because of what goes on, it's because people was fighting. We didn't know nothing, you know what I'm saying? They didn't give us some good counselors. They didn't give us nothing to actually help us in the community to actually go out there. You know what I'm saying? Especially police itself was actually killing people where I was at in Green Correctional Facility. There was, anything was going on in there. It was like nobody knew how to call a lawyer when their arm got broken or something. You know what I'm saying? It was so much stuff that's going on in there that people need to actually open their eyes. And especially because of me, because I was up there with people that I was in a box, and I'm hearing of somebody killing themselves or somebody being in a box for 2.5 years, and you only 21. You know what I'm saying? So that don't make no sense. You feel what I'm saying? You got people that's in there that been there for 3 years in Green Correctional Facility box, and they still there. You know what I'm saying? There's no, and the counselors is weak. They're not there to help you. When I maxed out, and I was, supposed to go home, they planned a banger, and where I was living at. A banger is a weapon. A weapon was planned there when I was supposed to go home. Now, I told them, I said, that wasn't mine. They said, no, they wrote a note and said that you were selling weapons around the jail. There was no investigation happening, nothing. You basically took 6-7 months from my family that I could have gave to them. But as we know, everybody needs to open up a little bit more what's going on, especially in young jails in Green and Wash. You know what I'm saying? Seeing a lot of police killing people. This is not, people tend to not understand that what we see and what I've seen is incredible. You know what I'm saying? My question is, what can we do to keep continuing? Not continue, but stop from what I've seen. You know what I'm saying?
Thank you, man. Thank you.
I'll quickly say something. For me, it goes back. So Ricky mentioned about the school to prison pipeline. So that you know, New York is only one of 2 states that automatically charges 16 and 17-year-olds as adults. So here we are. We have young kids who are a little bit past their formative years, who aren't mentally mature enough to make the right decisions, are being put in adult jails and prison around some people who have been career criminals. So what do you think the influence is going to be? That's the first part. The second part is this. It was mentioned earlier by Leanne about the whole providing services and the importance of that and the impact of that. Young lady asked the question from Rikers Island. So my organization quickly does what we do is, and Vidal's a product of what we do. We're called Drive Change, and we train, we employ, and we mentor the formerly incarcerated young people, ages 17 to 25. We teach them transferable skills in culinary arts, hospitality, money management, accounting, as well as a system and getting licensed credentials. So it's about not just hard skill education and about credentials. More importantly, we help them uncover and lift all the heavy stuff that they got to discover that they have a jewel inside of them. Everyone has a jewel inside of them. The problem is we all don't know we have it yet. So sometimes you have to help them unpack it, and it's not easy. So, pouring into our young people with soft skill development, as well as grown people, like a lot of grown men, which was mentioned earlier. I know a lot of friends of mine who spent 20, 30 years in prison, and now here they are, they come home, they've been removed for over 3 decades, and now their parole officers on their back about get a job. Like, how do you expect someone who's been removed for 3 decades to just come home and just go right into the workforce and work as if nothing is wrong? Some of what Vidal's talking about is like the system. I always say this. The system is not broken. The system is doing exactly what it was intended to do. Oppress a demographic of people, and until we find a way to disrupt the system, which is happening, like little increment changes are happening. It does not one organization is the savior. It takes a lot of different organizations, a lot of different people. As long as we continue to push forward, change is happening. It's not happening at the rate we want it to happen, unfortunately, but think back 20, 30 years. Things are much different now than they were before. So that's what I have to say to that. Johnny? So I'm going to turn it over to Isaac. So thank you again. Can we have a hand for all of our panelists? And remember, you can only keep what you have by giving it away. Thank you.
So thank you again for our panelists. Thank you everyone for being here on this weekend as well.
All right, this is Spoon Jackson from Lancaster State Prison. I've been in over 3.5 decades in prison, and I'm a poet activist. And this first piece I'm going to read is called Struggle to Be Free, and it's a prose piece. I don't want to give loneliness freelance to do its thing, but ultimately, sometimes it happens anyway. So long it has been since my body has been where it wanted to go. I read, write. I long for a hug, a long walk down the beach, a hike up a mountain path, and to plant and watch a garden prosper in spring. I long to go to Sweden, where I know people care for me. I ponder, I dream, and wonder. I struggle to be free yesterday, today, and tomorrow, not unlike what came before. The days seem to run into each other like merging clouds. And only yesterday, a moment ago, it seems like I was 19. There's a place inside me back then, an unknown area I went to when I started this time in prison decades ago. A place inside I did not know existed, or know now how I naturally went there each time some new prison horror, rule, or behavior required me to go to this spot. Like everyone, everywhere in the world, upon awakening each morning, I struggle to be free. I struggle to be who I am. I try to avoid the omnipresent thoughts of loneliness, boredom, death, and aloneness that are enhanced tenfold in prison, but the thoughts keep coming. The green grass and dwarfed flowers have been cut and rolled under by pounds of steel. A few bees are busy seeking to pollinate the remaining damaged flowers and bring them back to life. They suckle out what is left of the bulbs. From board, thick, thin plastic window on the backside of the cell, I can see rock doves and geese, turkeys, and a couple of huge blackbirds, crows poised on the edge of silence. There are only marble-sized spots in the window I can see out of, and then only if I twist and strain my eyes and body. I can see out of the window where the rain had washed away some of the paint that darkens the window in the colorless wall. I hope there will be an angle so the sun can blink in through the window and share some hope. Why can't we live our dreams, each being in their own niche, where loneliness and despair are like faraway stars, a million light years from here, where love, peace, and kindness bloom like sunflowers? Why must life be a dream, a moment, a utopia, a puff of smoke? Oh why must a lovely wildflower wither and go away when the sun forever shines? Standing in the same spot each morning, I struggle to be who I am for a day, for a moment.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
At dusk, the red-headed black turkey vultures appear, circling closer and closer like soft, flowing kites, not once flapping their wings. Still, I am in awe of the small things, baby sparrows, crows, geese, spiders, blackbirds, cowbirds, rock doves. They make me smile like the lovely spider's webs in the corner of an art room window, and the daddy long-legged spiders in the cage outside the art room, where I sit and play my native American flute. The sweet sun rays of winter, summer, spring, and fall from my heart. Looking at this transparent moon and daylight sky makes me hope. It all makes me wonder about nothing in particular. No language is required, no reason. This one is called Hands Held High, Die Jim Crow. Die Jim Crow, hands held high, hands held low. For peace in America, where do my hands go? Die Jim Crow, I know your history, your legend of woe. Unarmed black man shot down in the middle of town. All a cop has to say is I thought he was going for a gun. Hands held high, reaching for the sun, universal sign of peace, even in the Middle East. Die Jim Crow, I know your legacy, your history and legend of woe. America, not only won't you let Jim Crow die, you shoot unarmed man in the head. You enslaved him and leave him for dead in your Jim Crow prisons. Not only won't you let Jim Crow die, you transform and morph it into schools, businesses, religions, and governments. How long will that crow fly? How many unarmed men must die? Should my brothers keep their hands high or low or get down on their elbows? How long will that Jim Crow sing and dance on murdered souls? Hands held high, hands held low. For peace in America, where do my hands go? This one is called Cave. Standing in this cave, looking out this crack of a window, hoping there will be an angle, a path for the sun to break in through this tiny crease in this hunk of stone. This place where they do not believe in trees as though they are evil spirits, there are none here. No bluebirds singing, no crickets fiddling, no only unnecessary chatter, nothing. Even the sky is diluted by illusions of powers. The winds carries the sounds that are refused to be heard, the whips and whispers of the night. Longing to go to a rich flowing meadow where flowers bloom without retribution. This one is called Secrets. I know why they cut down. Okay. I know why they cut down trees, because the trees have seen it all. The conspiracies, the genocides, the slaveries, the Rwandas, the Wacos, the Bosnias, the Holocaust. Hitler wasn't born, he was made. Under a tree, Madonna was raped. Isaac Newton was hit by an apple. Eve caressed the tree's sweetness. The trees tell all while exposed to the sky. They speak of the secrets of the illuminated one-eyed meetings held in darkness in 10 heads. With 10 heads, the trees saw who really killed Malcolm and Martin and know under which tree Hoffa sleeps. They saw the founding fathers conspire with England to keep America forever white. Wars, slavery, stock market crashes, poverty, fascism doesn't just happen any more than cars just happen to drive down the streets without drivers. Line it up a bit. Well, no, I'm not going to line it up. It's called Go On. I'm a life without prisoner, and hopefully they'll let me out one day, because they've been doing a lot of fixing the laws here in California a little bit. They use this for the death penalty, but I wrote it because I got life without, and it's called Go On. I wrote it for Samuel Beckett, actually. I was in contact with Samuel Beckett when I did the play at San Quentin back in the days called Waiting for Godot. I played Pazzo. And that introduced me to Bill Irwin, who's still a friend of mine some 27 years later. And it's called Go On for Samuel Beckett. I cannot go on like this, but I will go on. On and on, even when on is off. Something is stirring in my soul, wanting to burst out like a hot spring in the desert, wanting to come out, and I don't know what it is. In the moment, I hope it's a poem. I hope it's a song. Something vast like Euripides, something wise and funny like Aristophanes, something deep like Langston Hughes, so deep in the seas where no light goes. I know what it is. I want to create my way off this lockdown and write my way out of prison. They allowed redemption once, but now only condemnation. I cannot go on, but I will go on and on, even when on becomes off. Melancholic and sad, they are letting some lifers go home, some I have known for a lifetime. And that's a good thing, yet there's no end in sight for me. And I don't know anymore where to go to get the strength to go on. I don't know where to go to leave this sadness and pain and make my heart sing again and make my spirit soar again. Everywhere I look, there's a big sign that says no. No forgiveness, no love, no hope, no second chance, no dreams, no romance. I cannot go on, but I will go on and on, even when on comes off. But I have nowhere to go, nowhere that says yes. Yes, it's okay to dream, for some come true. Yes, it's okay to hope, for freedom is free. Yes, it's okay to love, for love can be true. I sit here in the moment in melancholic limbo. Why keep dipping into an empty well? I cannot go on, but I will go on, even when on becomes off, and I have nowhere to go. This one is called Meditative Monks. Trees that stood like meditative monks for years were chopped down like unarmed soldiers. The old tennis shoe tree where I watched sparrows spar with lizards up and down its branches, where people going home hung their old tennis shoes. The four-headed bush tree trimmed like a well-kept afros. The evergreen tree, half dead from chemical poison, where a bird feeder sat sometime from dusk to dawn and fed the sparrows, wrens, and red-winged blackbirds. Mass destruction of the rainforest, plants and animals, so that the 1% can fill their pockets and soar. While Mother Earth bleeds from the pain politicians score, plants and animals doomed, some even before they are discovered. Tigers, leopards, gibbons, rhinos, and elephants shot down like unarmed people in protest. How long will 1% rip out the guts of Mother Earth while politicians and scientists play games with climate change? When the waters no longer reach the oceans, when the mountains no longer reach the skies, when the forest no longer cleans the air, will mankind die? Mass destruction of forests, valleys, mountains, and streams, mass pollutions of skies, waters, and dreams, mass pollution of the entire planet so that the 1% can fill their pockets and score. This one is called Sweet Delights, to lighten it up a bit. He sat there until he was nothing, until he was everything, a part of the whole of the part. He sat there past the dawn of time. He sat there wondering, will the moon be strong enough to pull the earth into his arms one day? He wanted to go where peace hangs out like a welcome sign.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
He wanted to go where silence was not looked upon as mental illness. He wanted to know, when will poets like rappers, pop, and rock stars have panties and bras and candy and other sweet delights thrown at them on stage? And this one is called, we got dogs here at this prison, this so-called honor prison, sniffing. Look into your eyes, wearing no disguise. If I were you, I'd kiss me. Look into your eyes, wearing no disguise. If I were your dog, I'd lick me. They had the dogs introduce themselves to each other today by butt sniffing. I wonder will that work for humans? People are more human with no pants on, more disarming like a strong noun or a powerful verb. Living in the moment, perception, deceptions, and conceptions disrobed.
This is Global Tel Link. You have a prepaid call from
Spoon, Night Realness.
an inmate at the California State Prison, Los Angeles County, Lancaster, California. This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded. To accept this call, stay or dial 5 now. Thank you for using Global Tel Link.
Okay, and I tried right now, I'm really trying hard to get out of prison. So I got 3 issues in the courts, and I just had one ruling in my favor. That don't mean that ain't going to happen all the way right now, but still there's a shot for me to get out. And I've been paying attention to that political atmosphere with old Donald Trump having a chance to run for president, and I think that's a combination between Hitler and Manson, so that don't seem cool for society out there. But, I try to keep telling people to be real, and I was participating in the thing they had years ago to get rid of solitary confinement, in which they call for racial peace, as people fought to get solitary confinement removed, and they won that legal battle, and they got it out of California, where they can't just leave people indefinitely in the hole in solitary confinement now. They got to give ways to get out. Yeah. Go to spoonjackson.com. I got a Twitter, I got a Facebook, I got everything.
Wow. Okay. Better than I was doing.
Yeah. So, but don't just say you're gonna do it though. I get, it breaks my heart when people say that and don't do it. What breaks my heart, my most meaningful connections come from Sweden. America act like they hate me.
Really?
They're from liberal to conservative. They act like they hate me, while Canadians and Sweden and Norwegians, all of them, bless me with letters and everything. I don't hardly hear anything from America. There's a film being done right now. It was done by a Canadian filmmaker called Spoon. It's traveling the world, all the places, but it's been turned down in America. It's been to Canada, it's been to France, it's been to Spain. It's going to Taiwan right now, and competing in film festivals, but they won't accept it in America. So my most meaningful connections came from Sweden, and they continue to come from Sweden.
So if you could have lunch with one person in the United States and impart like one big message to them, what would that be?
I don't know. It'd probably be one of my great nieces or nephews that I've never met. And I would tell them that there's only one race in the world, and I know it's a cliche, and that we must fight to preserve just the one race that has many expressions.
Which race is that you're talking about?
The human. That's period. I know it's just the human race, and people want to put all that you know, we got a lot of racism that happened in prison, and yet still it haven't jaded me into becoming a racist because I won't allow it to. And I think everybody got to, you know, kind of walk like that. In their own shoes, yeah. That majority of us, especially the lifers, want to be in here, and that we are hard ass and just want to kill everybody, rape everybody, but that's all a myth. That's perpetuation of what the media and what people that politicians are trying to make money off the regular people, and that's the 1% again, trickling it down to trickle it back up to mess everybody around. That's all it is. Because crime has been going down since I've been in prison, and I've been in prison since the 70s. So now I want people to know that everybody is human, that we all, you know, we all capable of, you know, there's nothing alien to any other human being, you know. And once we learn that, we try to get in touch with our best and most truest self and live a realness life. That's where I look at it. Because what I did, I paid for, and if there is such a thing. And most lifers, some 90-something% of the lifers, never come back to prison or get in trouble, big trouble again. And they know that in California, but yet it's still hard to get out. So